Intel is shutting down Arc. Arc is dead on arrival. Battle Mage has already been canceled. This is just a small fraction of the article titles and YouTube video names of discussion around Arc. In fact, I think a lot of the PC enthusiast community, whether they intentionally know that they're doing it or it's a more subconscious thing, have already accepted the narrative that the Intel Arc A series is a flop. Now, there definitely are reasons to criticize Arc and the failures in some aspects, but I kind of want to have a little bit more of a nuanced discussion about it because there's a lot of gray area here. So I want to challenge this notion: is Intel Arc in 2023 a flop? Now, the problem with that question, it's just very open-ended, because what aspects do you consider important in considering a product, especially a tech product like this, a failure? I mean, firstly, sales numbers, right? You'd think even sales numbers would be something to consider as a flop, right? Arc hasn't even sold that much. It's barely put a dent into the market. But I think Intel is really more concerned about how well the product is progressing rather than the initial sales of the first launch. They're more interested in gathering data from people using the cards rather than how many of the actual cards that they sell. You also have to consider maybe the short-term impact of what Arc has done. I mean, what is it competing against in terms of GPU SKUs? Does it force the market to become cheaper? How well does it function on release, etc., etc.? You also have to consider maybe the longer-term trajectory of this project. You know, maybe people aren't interested in cards now, but maybe they might down the line, or maybe when they buy a new laptop or something like that. I mean, can we see the seeds being planted that will grow in future generations of this card, future driver software, etc., that shows that this will be a good long-term project, that as a brand, they can be performant and reliable and have good price in the future. You also have to consider sort of the relationship between what is considered behind the scenes successful and on a consumer facing level successful. That something might perform like fine, it might be a decent price for consumers, but the actual process of getting that project to life might have been nightmarish. Now, from what I've read from a lot of tech reviewers, they seem pretty meh on Intel Arc, with some generosity given. Not everything works perfectly, that's fine, but it's just okay. But they're really more hopeful for sort of the longer term future of this project. But one thing I've noticed is that there is a small yet very loud minority of tech reviewers talk about Intel Arc much more negatively. And I understand why you would talk much more negatively about Arc, because their problems are the same as the problems of the mainstream reviewers, except they take larger issue with it. That they say, oh, it's unacceptable a card should launch like this. Oh, it's unacceptable that DX9 didn't work on launch, etc., yada, yada, yada. But I really can't stand a lot of kind of like the moral grandstanding of them, that they love to just stand and scream there's nothing good about Intel Arc whatsoever, and that the project is basically just a dead man walking. So why should anybody waste their time and resources looking into and investigating any of this stuff? You're just all a bunch of idiots for buying into this. And like, it's just so frustrating to deal with. In fact, I've heard one YouTuber argue that Intel releasing Arc cards actually strengthens the position of AMD and Nvidia's duopoly. Absolutely unhinged take. Probably the worst take I think I've maybe ever heard. And maybe some of my viewers who maybe watch some other people know exactly who I'm talking about. And so these two camps kind of provide this very interesting dichotomy in Intel Arc discussion, where these two camps will see the exact same performance numbers that they got, and then be like, oh wow, one camp thinks that it's really good performance, and the other camp will be like, wow, absolutely terrible. Look at those performance numbers. Awful, awful. The difference between these two groups is that they hold Arc to kind of two separate kind of standards. And I don't mean standards as in one has low standards and one has high standards. I mean standards in terms of like perspective about what way you look at Arc can influence, like, hey, this is actually kind of a decent product, to this is the worst garbage fire ever. And so we can kind of make a line here of one extreme and the other extreme and kind of find somewhere in the middle that is like a good, decent Intel Arc take that actually I think a lot of people would agree with. So on one end of the extreme, you have people holding Intel Arc to kind of the ultimate potential of the card, saying that, well, it should have come out at the end of 2021 with perfect drivers during the Ethereum boom and been performing as well as a 3070. That is the standard. That standard is also probably what the Intel executives are probably expecting the card to be like. So yeah, if you hold to that standard, it's a total failure. I mean, it doesn't consistently perform like a 3070 in any real game benchmarks. The cards are a year late, and they aren't half the price of the competition because, well, it's not the Ethereum boom anymore. Prices are back to normal-ish. I mean, the ARC launch date was such a meme for a long time. I remember the Game Awards had an ad for Intel ARC launching in Q1 of 2022 in December of 2021. The card didn't come out until 10 months later. Now, sort of my counter argument to that is that I think a lot of what people expected ARC to be at like ultimate, like on time, ready to go, stuff like that, I think a lot of that seemed pretty unrealistic and unachievable. I don't want to really get that much into the Raja Kaduri debate. That could be a whole video unto itself. And I'm not entirely a silicon engineer, so I'm not exactly sure what I'm talking about, but it's of my kind of layman's perspective that I think even the most hyper-competent person that you could have put in charge of Intel Arc to make this architecture, I still think there would have been plenty of growing pains, and a lot of these issues would have happened under them too. Maybe some of them not as bad, but it still would have happened. Now, if you look at the other end of the extreme, which is Intel's own claims about, oh, the A770 absolutely stomps over the RTX 3060 because look, all these DX12 games outperform it in the price to performance ratio. We're the total winners here. Yeah, that perspective's a little sus too. Now, I do think there is a little bit of merit to those claims, but the problem is that those claims were entirely reverse engineered in the marketing stage. I mean, Intel obviously controls the price of these cards, so it's easy to reverse engineer a narrative when you're selling these cards, forcing the price to performance ratio up. But even just in marketing, putting all these asterisks on the side that, oh, we're only counting for DX12, because when you looked outside DX12 and Vulkan, at least at the launch of the A series, nope, they weren't better than the 3060 and 3060 Ti. So now that we've really kind of defined the extremes of the discussion, what's kind of my take about Intel Arc being a failure? I think for the short term, just somebody wants to go out and buy a GPU, and they're looking at the price range that all these ARC cards are available at, or the SKUs that they're in laptops. I think Intel only did okay. Now, also, you have to take into account that this is a first-generation product, and so that means that we're not really comparing it in the same way to its competitors. And I know that does seem unfair for the Intel Arc card, but we've seen the teething issues, and we've seen them try to fix it as fast as they can. I think they deserve the benefit of the doubt here. But it's incredible, even for such a new product line, that even in this hyper-specific scenario, that Intel is beating out NVIDIA in price to performance in DX12. That's pretty good. Now, counterpoint, Intel didn't entirely undercut the GPU market like I think it expected to, because AMD still has RDNA 2 cards floating out there that are still a better value than the Intel Arc cards. But counterpoint to that, AMD and Intel aren't even real competition compared to NVIDIA anyways, so... However, I think the biggest success for Arc is really more the long term. The existence of an already semi-competent third GPU competitor. In fact, I would argue this aspect has aged better and better in the year that Intel Arc has existed since its initial launch in laptops in Q2 of 2022. Since those early Arc SKUs, we've got RTX 40 series and AMD RX 7000 series. Price and performance has literally not increased at all with this generation, and this isn't just even an issue with the high-end SKUs. As we get further and further down into cheaper and cheaper SKUs, it seems like, no, we're definitely not going to increase the value of performance that you're getting for your money. I know some people have this weird take that they think that the whole high prices of the new series as like a 4D chess move that, oh, they're going to decrease the prices once they sell out all of their lower end SKUs that they're trying to clear out right now. But I think that's just an incredibly copium take. I think that even if the RTX 30 cards just vanished from all warehouse shelves tomorrow, I would not expect an RTX 40 price cut. I expect the prices to stay the same. And as AMD and Nvidia keep playing the stupid game that we let them play, Intel is really the only one that actually seems interested in increasing price to performance. Now, if Intel keeps going this direction and they keep iterating and improving, I don't think it's entirely unreasonable that we could potentially see Intel be maybe even the second biggest player in the GPU space. And all of that massive amount of potential that Intel could have starts with an okay graphics card they launched in 2023. So anyways, guys, that's it for the video, and have a good day.